What is up, gunfighters? Today, I want to talk about a modern fighting rifleman's rifle, the ultimate M16. That's the topic du jour. If that interests you, stay tuned. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that experience, military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, competition shooting, firearms instruction, and military, law enforcement, and the private sector. Some of that will tie in today. There's some other stuff that probably isn't relevant to today. Bullet points will be in the show notes. But on that, I have a bit of experience with the M16 platform, the M16A2, the M16A4. Also, to compare it to some other stuff, I have real-world experience with M4 platforms, quite a bit, as you might imagine. I have experience with Mini 14s in the real world, not just like plinking at the range, but like using them in real-world stuff. So I know my way around. Also, SCARs, use those in the real world. So all that being said, why would we be talking about an antiquated, esoteric dinosaur like the M16 platform, the M16 rifle? That's a good question. And I want to reiterate the M16 rifle. The M4 is a carbine, and it does well as a carbine. The M16 is a rifle. So if you're going to pick a rifleman's fighting rifle, it makes sense to ding, 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 shoot a rifle. The M16, A1, A2, A4, is a 20-inch barreled rifle. You get several advantages with this. Some are fairly obvious, some are less so if you're not acquainted with the platform. Numero uno, you have a longer barrel. That means shooting the same cartridge, 223, 556, you will get more velocity. In general, that will also equal better trajectory, better external ballistics, and better terminal ballistics, meaning in general the round will do better even if it's the same load fired out of the same rifle on the same target. You'll get better performance out of the rifle than the carbine because you're picking up velocity, even if it's the exact same load, because you have a longer barrel. You burn more powder. That's how that works. Also, in general, since you have a longer barrel, if you are using iron sights, you will have a longer sight radius. Now, that doesn't mean the rifle will be more accurate. That's a common misconception. You could have a 10-inch barrel that's just as accurate as a 35-inch barrel if you wanted to make a 35-inch barrel. But if we're using iron sights, think of it like a level. If I'm trying to hang a picture frame, I can use a little tiny level. It's fairly straight, hanging it on the wall, no big deal. If I'm framing a house, I probably don't want one of those little tiny, 1-inch long levels. I want a long, several foot long level. Why? Because the longer it is, the easier it is to judge imperfections. If one of the ends of that level moves just a little bit, it's going to throw that bubble off. I'm going to see that imperfection. The same is true with iron sights. If you put both in a ransom, I know we're going off on a rabbit hole here, but we have people from all levels of understanding on firearms, and you're all welcome here. So if you put a little tiny Smith & Wesson J-frame snub nose into a vise, a ransom rest that has no movement at all, and you somehow welded a scope on there so that it didn't move and you could shoot exactly precisely, and you did the same thing with a 6-inch barreled Smith & Wesson K-frame, they could be exactly the same amount of mechanical accuracy out of both firearms. There's no reason why the J-frame wouldn't be just as accurate. Again, the barrel length has nothing to do with accuracy. But as somebody that doesn't mind a J-frame every now and then, those sights are really close together, so it can be hard to shoot at distance with them. The same basic firearm with a 6-inch barrel, meaning the sights are much farther apart, is going to be more accurate for you if you're shooting iron sights because the sights are farther apart. If there's an imperfection, you will notice it because the sights are farther apart. That's how that works. So getting back to the rifle versus the carbine, in general, the M16 is going to have a greater sight radius than the carbine. And you might say, who cares? Because this is 2026. I would say I care because optics are great when they work. My philosophy on optics is I like optics. I'm not against optics. Optics are definitely a force multiplier. But my philosophy on optics is I will use the optic until it breaks. And when it breaks, I will use the iron sights. If it's for a life-saving fighting rifle, that's my philosophy. If it's just a plinking gun or a 22 or your PCC that you want to shoot at an indoor range, whatever, I don't care. Put a budget red dot on it. But if it's for fighting, for life-saving, backup iron sights, I think, are still relevant. With something like an M16A2 or M16A4, it has really, really good, perhaps some of the best, as far as military rifles go, iron sights. When I was in the Marine Corps way back in the day, I was issued an old, beat-up, ragged, honestly, piece of crap M16A2 that looked like it had been drugged behind a Hummer for who knows how long. Rattled. It was as much silver probably as it was black on the upper receiver. It was just beat, or slightly more black than silver. Thing was rattly. It was just ragged, just a nasty gun. It was pretty bad. It gave me a catastrophic malfunction during the war. It just stopped working. But still, with that piece of crap gun that was probably way past its service life, because this was before the GWAT, before we had a big, budget for the military compared to now, I was still able to shoot with those iron sights. This was before optics on M16s. I was able to shoot expert in the Marine Corps with that rifle, which compared to a rifle you're probably going to buy was much worse. I could get hits on a man-sized target at 500 meters, which is 550 yards, with those iron sights. Just the sights that come on it. And we're talking no rest, not resting it on anything, not resting it on sandbags like the Army does, and I served in the Army too, but just holding the gun in your arms, getting hits with those sights out to 550 yards or 500 meters. It's doable. It's possible if you know what you're doing as a rifleman. And again, the topic du jour is a rifleman's fighting rifle. This is a big deal if you think that one day you might be relegated to shooting iron sights, or you just like iron sights and want to shoot iron sights. I like iron sights. I like shooting with iron sights. If you're only going to shoot iron sights, this is a giant advantage. But even if you're going to run an optic, if something happens, either in an acute scenario or a long-term grid down scenario, you break your optic. If you're into one of these plastic push feed, #MeToo guns that only takes an optic, and your optic breaks and you don't have another to replace it, okay. I guess you could just run around and shove the muzzle into something and pull the trigger and hope for the best. But if you want to aim, you need iron sights. The M16, A2, A4 has really, really good iron sights, really rugged, robust iron sights. I've seen a lot of optics break. I've even seen M16s break. I have never seen the iron sights on an M16 break. I'm sure you could do it, but they're pretty rugged. So you can still, with the rifle, have a really good sight radius and really good sights. Now with an M4 carbine, you can get decent hits out to 300 meters, right? You give up a little bit, but 300 meters is still pretty far. But if you're a discerning rifleman let's say an expert rifleman, you could get hits with a rifle out farther, quite a bit farther. And not just that, if that's true, then in closer, if you have a smaller target like just a headshot at 200 yards, you're much more likely to get it with irons than you are with the M4. That's just how that works. Okay, so those things are pretty obvious and apparent. Some less apparent things are that the M16 was developed as an actual infantry fighting rifle. The M4 carbine was originally, as I understand it, and I'm not the biggest nerd on this, but as I understand it, the M4 was actually designed for rear echelon troops, pogues, as we might call them in the infantry, people other than grunts, not the main line, not the actual fighting force. It was originally designed for backup stuff, like guys that weren't going to be main fighters but still wanted a gun. Like they were going to be artillery, they were going to be truck drivers, and there's nothing like those guys serve their country too. And there's no disrespect to those guys, but their main job is not pulling a trigger. Their main job is driving a truck or, firing artillery. But they still might want a weapon bigger than a pistol. That's what the carbine was originally designed for, the M4 as I understand it. And because of that, it was never specified that it had to be as reliable or have as long a service life as the actual M16 fighting rifle. Now, as time went on, most of the military gravitated towards the M4 because, surprise, it's lighter. And, surprise, as somebody that was served in, combat and served in Iraq and was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps after that, the majority of fighting actually happens a lot closer than people think. We have to learn this lesson over and over and over again. Most of this stuff happens up close and dirty. But sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes you want the longer shots, but most of it happens up close and dirty. So, and here's another thing. If you served in the GWAT, they piled you with so much garbage, so much crap that you became almost combat ineffective. The power to weight ratio was way off. And instead of getting rid of some of that extra crap, they lightened the weapon, which in my opinion was one of the last things they should have lightened. They should have gotten rid of some of the other stupid stuff that they had, in my opinion, and kept a bigger, heavier weapon. But anyway, that is what it is. So a lot of the military, because they had so much extra stuff to carry, went to that M4 carbine. Like for a long time, it's been the Army's main issue weapon, even for their frontline infantry. And it does pretty well. I'm not taking away from that. But it was never designed to go the round count, to go the distance of the M16. The M16 has a rifle-length gas system. All things being equal, it's less violent. It's smoother as an operating system. You have a lot longer distance before that hot gas comes back into the barrel, which in general should mean you get much less barrel port erosion. That gas port erodes with every shot. And the farther that port is away from you and the chamber, because that's where your max pressure is, the more gentle and the more longevity you're going to get out of the same weapons platform. So all of the things being equal, a rifle-length gas system is going to give you a much longer life than a carbine-length gas system, and in general, should be more reliable. That being said, again, the M4 is a good weapon for what it is, and most people aren't going to shoot out an M4, especially like a chrome-lined chamber, chrome-lined barrel M4. Most people aren't going to put, 4,000 or 5,000 rounds to an M4. But if you're a rifleman, you might. If you shoot competition, you might. That's another advantage to that rifle length. Okay, so I got to thinking about this, and this is something I may or may not do. I may just talk about it as a thought experiment. I may decide I want to do it. But if I wanted to design, or not design because it's already been designed, if I wanted to optimize a intermediate cartridge rifleman's rifle for fighting, because the rifleman's rifle is the Winchester Model 70 Pre-64, which I'm blessed to have. It's a fantastic rifle. And you could argue there are some other ones that are definitely rifleman's rifle, but that is like the rifleman's rifle, and for good reason. It deserves that reputation. I would say a pre-64 Winchester in good condition is probably more practical as a rifleman's rifle than 90% of the rifles out today. Because most guys that have a rifle are just that. They're guys that have a rifle, not what I would consider a rifleman. A guy with a rifle is like a dude with a gym membership. Doesn't matter how fancy your gym membership is, or you're a VIP member or whatever. It matters how much you go and use it and train with it. Gym membership or rifle. So anyway, what I would consider the fighting rifleman's rifle would be an M16 variant. Now, there's a couple of top contenders. The Colt and the FN, and I've used these in the contracting world and the military world. They both make a decent rifle, Colt or FN. They both make, now I'm going to specify for this the A4 variant, which is the flat top upper variant. The A2 would be fine if you only wanted to use iron sights. But it's a really good platform. It's one of the big improvements the military did was going to a flat top upper on the M4s and the M16s. Now, both FN and Colt make an M16A4 semi-auto variant. That's, as I understand it, pretty much identical except for it's not full auto or 3-round burst. Which, if you gave me a choice that I could even right now, if you made it totally like you're going to get your own special machine gun tax stamp and you can have it, and you gave it to me, I would rather have just a regular safe semi M16A4. I'd rather have that than a safe semi 3-round burst. If you've never had the displeasure of having to shoot a rifle with 3-round burst, 1, it's pretty useless. 2, 99.999% of the time in practical stuff, you're going to shoot your rifle on semi-auto anyway. And 3, there are 3 different sear engagement surfaces on a 3-round burst mechanism. It's not like a full auto, it's a 3-round burst. And you often, after shooting it a while, will get 3 different trigger pulls, which sucks if you're trying to be a good rifleman. Every trigger pull is different weight, different movement, different pre-travel, post-travel, is garbage. As somebody that shot a lot of full auto, I don't really care about it. What I care about is getting rounds on target. Don't really care about the full auto. If I want to shoot full auto, I want like a bipod or a tripod mounted proper machine gun, like a 240 Golf or something. Anyway, getting back to, you can get a civilian version, which is safe semi, which is just as good for what we're talking about here. No, stop with the binary firing trigger and stop with this just get a good trigger. So both FN and Colt make a good safe semi version of the M16A4. It's got a decent contour barrel for this. It has really good, both of them have really good iron sights. I think they both come with the original carry handle iron sights, which you would get in zero and shoot with and then mount your optic on the flat top and keep the irons as a backup. I think they both come with the quad rail. That's a bit dated. They both come with a fixed stock, which I would probably keep. I like that. They both come with the ability to mount a bayonet, which if we're talking about like long-term survival, I call that my ammo contingency plan, right? That's why the bayonet's been around for centuries. It's your ammo contingency plan. They both have the ability to mount a bayonet. This rifle is pretty good as it is as a starter. There are some things that I would do if I wanted to make the ultimate rifleman's fighting rifle with either one of these, and they're both, I would say, comparable quality, both the FN and the Colt. I probably go with the Colt, but it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. One of the things I would do is get a better bolt carrier group. Mostly just because I don't like cleaning M16s and M4s. They're a giant pain in the butt. I could clean several shotguns or several handguns in the amount of time it takes to decently clean a direct impingement AR-15 platform. So mostly because it's way easier to clean, I would get a better bolt carrier group. It can also help with malfunctions and being slicker. Even just a nitride bolt carrier group, which is usually cheaper and, in my opinion, much better than the military finish, which is manganese phosphate. Why do they still use manganese phosphate? Because the M16 dates to the 1960s, right? We have decent stuff now. Nitride is both cheaper and better and slicker, in my opinion, which, all of the things being equal, should give you less malfunctions. So I would probably replace the bolt carrier group with, at minimum, a nitride. But I'd probably go with tin, titanium nitride, or chrome, because both of those are harder. And those aren't gimmicks. I've shot stuff that is titanium nitride, and I am very impressed with how long it takes to wear that stuff down. So I would upgrade the bolt carrier group to chrome or titanium nitride, or at least nitride. So that would be an improvement right there. Mostly just because it would be easier for me to clean. And if I went longer without cleaning it, it should give me less malfunctions. And if an AR is going to be your go-to, you should make sure you have spare bolt carrier group or two. Because most of the things that are going to go wrong and happen with that gun are usually in the bolt carrier group. I would also, because again, you can shoot expert, you can shoot man-sized targets at 550 yards with iron sights with the regular garbage military trigger that's in those rifles, but it is a pretty bad trigger. I would upgrade the trigger to a good, robust, proven, serviceable trigger. Now I shoot CMP high power because it's service rifle with a 4.5 pound 2-stage trigger. That's because that's the best they let you shoot, and that's a pretty bad trigger still. It's still better than the military trigger, the mil spec trigger. But I would like to see something like, I like a flat single stage. You may not. You may prefer something else. That really depends on the rifleman. But I would definitely go with an upgraded trigger. For me, I'd probably go with a flat. And this is still a fighting rifle, so I don't want a 1.5 pound trigger. I don't want a 2 pound trigger. I probably want heavier than that. Somewhere between that and a 4.5 pound trigger. Generally, a pretty good one is like a flat 3 to 3.5 pound trigger for this kind of thing. For me, you may have different preferences. This is not a rifle meant to be shot off a bench or off a rest. This is a rifleman's rifle. It's meant to be shot in classic shooting positions, standing, sitting, kneeling, prone. If you have a rest and you have all the time in the world, which you generally don't, and you want to rest it on something, fine. But for this type of rifle where you're going to be running around with it, probably shooting quickly in dynamic positions, I don't want a trigger that's uber light. It's not about shooting little tiny groups off a bench. If you want to shoot little tiny groups off a bench, this is not the rifle for you. Other things that I would do, I would put on a more modern handguard. That big quad rail is just that it's big and heavy, and you don't want to put a bunch of stuff on here. I would probably, at minimum, there may be something else that I would go with. I would probably just put on, at minimum, the Magpul rifle length MOE handguard. You wouldn't have to really do anything except take the old handguards off and put the new ones on. They're lighter, they're sleeker, they've got less drag. You can still mount some accessories, and really the only one I probably would mount and keep on there would be a white light. And you'd make the gun a little bit lighter. I think the M16A4 is like 7.7 pounds, the Colt is. Probably just by changing out those big obese handguards, you could shave off some of that weight. So at minimum, I would do that. You could also look into swapping it out for a free float handguard, which if you're going to talk about shooting tiny groups all the time off a bench, yeah, you probably want a free floated handguard. There are some advantages if it's a fighting rifle. Again, this is a fighting rifle to just the military style 2-piece like clamshell handguards for austere conditions. Anyway, probably get a more modern handguard, even if it was still like a two-piece clamshell design. Something maybe lighter, something that would at least let me mount a white light. And of course, I would put a decent optic on there. Probably, well, I'm a big fan of 1-4s. I may go with something else, but a 1-4 or a fixed 4 or some kind of practical optic, not some giant obese, 4-12 or some ridiculous thing like that. Again, you want to shoot a tiny group off a bench, this is not your rifle. Go get a plastic push feed sub-MOA guaranteed #MeToo gun. It's a fighting rifle, so a fighting optic after I got my iron sights zeroed and good. Obviously, I would upgrade the ammo because M855 is pretty horrible ammo. I did not sign the Hague Convention. I could give two craps about what the Hague Convention says, and that's pretty bad ammo. I would get better ammo. And I would get a good sling, something that still let me shoot in a good rifleman's sling position, like a hasty sling and a sling tension position, if you know how to shoot those. If you don't, then it doesn't really apply to you. But if you know how to shoot a rifle like in the classic rifleman style with sling tension, and a more modern version of that, a hasty sling, a good practical sling, something like a good Magpul sling or a Rhodesian sling would actually be really good on this. Actually, a Rhodesian sling would actually be kind of awesome on this setup. I'd leave the fixed stock because the adjustable stocks, they're not really relevant to me. The fixed stock is fine and simpler and more rugged, and I could beat somebody with it if I have to. Right, they're just, I think, for this, not for everything, I think for this, the good fixed stock is fine. All the other things are pretty much good to go, right? It's got a good, I think both of these have good chrome hammer forged chrome line barrels, cold hammer forged chrome line barrels, which are good. They should be good barrels on both. That's one of the big things that's good on both of these rifles. The FN and Colt make good barrels. Pretty much everything else can kind of stay the way that it is, unless I'm forgetting something. Now, am I saying that this is the best rifle for everything, or this should be a go-to rifle? No, I don't. I think for most people, just like for most, even infantry in the military or most military guys, your M4 is better. I'm not saying this should be your go-to unless you want it to be. I'm saying I think there still is a place for a fighting rifle for riflemen, a fighting rifleman's rifle. That said, just a good handy short carbine is better for most people for most things, right? It's better for most law enforcement officers. It's better for most armed citizens. The M4, even with iron sights, should, if you're a decent rifleman, let you get decent hits out to 300 meters. That's plenty for most people. That's more than most people on the East Coast are ever going to engage anything, unless they artificially set up a scenario where they're going to shoot farther than that. And you save some weight. Yeah, you give up some longevity, but uppers are so cheap now. Probably by the time you shot 4,000 or 5,000 rounds out of an upper, you probably don't even care. You're probably looking for something else anyway, if you're being honest. Also, the big reason the military went to it, M4s are lighter. So I'm not saying that you should not have an M4 and just have one of these. What I'm saying is that we just did an episode on like beyond the basic battery. If you have your basic battery, you have a decent fighting carbine or fighting rifle, you might think about something like this. You're still going to have the high rate of fire. The gun's going to weigh a little bit more, but you're still going to have the same weight of ammo, right? And that's one of the big advantages of the 5.56. I'm not the biggest fan of the round, if I'm being honest. But one of the things that makes you a good rifleman is practicing. And you can practice a lot more because it's the cheapest, and you can carry a lot more because it weighs less. So there are advantages to the 5.56. So I think the M16 can still be relevant. So if I were kind of building the ultimate M16 for a fighting rifleman, those are my thoughts. That's what I might do if I were going to do such a project. Maybe some of you guys out there are thinking about such a project. So I thought I would give my thoughts and my training and experience on that. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do. Your tactical tip of the day. If you know about AR-15s and M16s, you know about charging handles. You also probably know what a giant pain in the rear it is to clean bolt carrier groups after you've shot, hundreds of rounds through them, and how caked on that carbon gets to the bolt. Well, a tactical tip is take the back of that bolt and put it inside your charging handle and use that as your scraper. It's aluminum. It works pretty good as a scraper. You can put it inside the little circle and move it around. Break off a bunch of that nasty carbon. especially if you've done it a bunch in the field and you don't have your whole bench. You're not going to let it sit overnight in simple green or CLP, and you just want to break off a bunch of carbon. The back of that, or the front of that, or the back of that is a scraper. Charging handle can work pretty well as a carbon scraper. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you afflict them in any way, and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. And your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. God is righteous. God is a righteous judge. If you are a strong man, a capable man, a fighting man, make sure you're using that for good and for the right reasons, and not just for yourself, right? If you're a strong fighting man, capable of fighting, you should be extending that to protect the weakest among us, the most vulnerable among us, widows and orphans. If not, kind of, what are you doing? You just out for yourself? Is that the kind of man that you are? No, we should be protecting the weakest and the most vulnerable among us, widows and orphans, are special categories to God that he talks about. So we should think about them too. They're important to God. They should be important to us. With that, thank you for listening and have a blessed day.